Happy New Year! And welcome back. Can you believe you haven't watched me on a video since last year? All right, once again, I have to be honest, I'm actually recording this in 2020, but when you're watching it, it's 2021. So I truly hope you are able to make the most of your 2 weeks off. While I can't predict the future, and I've told you before that I no longer try, I am going to assume that I was able to have an enjoyable break with my 2 little girls and husband. But I'm also sure that I am happy to be back and happy to be teaching again, and my daughters are happy to be back with their friends at the babysitter. Looks like we're going to be sticking with this hybrid thing, so let's make the most of it and let's move on to the 6th and 7th Amendment. Let's go ahead and pull out our pocket constitutions that we haven't touched since last year and turn to page 22. The 6th Amendment, V1, is a 6 in Roman numerals. All right, so the 6th Amendment says, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. So as you can tell, we're kind of continuing on from our theme from the 5th Amendment, that is going over the rights of the accused. And you might notice in there something that's part of the Miranda rights. But let's break this amendment down piece by piece so you can see what is actually being guaranteed to the accused with the 6th Amendment. So the first part I want to focus on is where it says that the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury. In fact, one of the ways that I tell students to remember the 6th Amendment is to think speedy 6. So by speedy, a speedy trial means that the defendant is tried or goes to trial for the alleged crimes within a reasonable amount of time after being arrested. Now, most states have laws that set forth the specific time, but the Constitution doesn't really say what speedy means. While many factors can come into account for there being a delay on trial, Congress did pass the Speedy Trial Act, which set a time limit of 70 days from the filing date of the indictment unless waived. And I believe in Ohio that it's 30 days, again, unless there are some circumstances that require a longer delay. So the other part of that statement is that the 6th Amendment guarantees a criminal defendant the right to be tried before an impartial jury, which will then consider the evidence and consider the law, and then decide whether or to find him or her guilty of the crimes charged. In almost all states, all 12 jurors must agree. So all 12 have to vote guilty or not guilty. It can't be a 10-2 vote or a 7-6 vote like in the Supreme Court. And I have to mention at this point that generally in this class, I don't show movies really at all, but one movie I do try to sneak in every year is one called 12 Angry Men. So some of you might be familiar with it. It's actually a play as well. And so I know some students have read it in English classes or in a drama class. And so, or even like a cinematic class, because it's a movie that's all filmed in one room. And so anyways, if you get a chance, I do recommend checking out 12 Angry Men. It really does do a good job of showing what has to happen in a jury. Now, there's a lot of controversy around it because they say that some of the things that happen in that movie could never actually happen. But still, just try to watch the movie if you can. It is black and white, but most students, when they start it out, they say, oh, this is going to be so boring, and they end up loving it. And I'll explain a little bit later how this week's Google form is going to kind of be your chance to act as a member of a jury. Back to the 6th Amendment, and I want to focus on where it says, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. So the 6th Amendment right to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation is just another protection meant to ensure that the accused receives a fair trial. A speedy public trial that is heard by an impartial jury is meaningless if a defendant is left in the dark about exactly the crime that they're being charged for. Next, it talks about witnesses. So the accused has the right to be confronted with the witnesses against him and to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor. So this is to protect you and to ensure that the evidence being brought against you is more than just written evidence, that if there's a witness there, they can confront you. And if you're being accused, you're also there. This puts to test their honesty in front of the judge and the jury. This also ensures if you are being accused of something that you can call your own witnesses on your behalf. And last, it says that you have the right to an assistance of counsel for your defense. And so that's referring to a lawyer. And a lawyer is a person who practices or studies law, an attorney or a counselor who argues for the guilt or defense of someone. And hopefully you caught the beginning of me reading this, that the Sixth Amendment starts by saying in all criminal prosecutions. So all of these factors play into criminal cases. And so a criminal case is a case where a criminal act has allegedly been committed. Some examples would be assault, murder, theft, drug possession, and vandalization. And so these are all crimes that have been committed. And so when we move on to the Seventh Amendment in just a second, we'll talk about civil cases, but everything I've talked to up until this point is referring only to criminal cases. So to summarize the speedy Sixth Amendment, you have a right to have your case decided on in a timely manner. You have a right to know what crime you're being charged with. You have a right to observe a witness testimony against you. You can have someone witness on your behalf, and you have a right to a lawyer to defend you. Let's move on to the Seventh Amendment.
You would already paid her everything that you owed her.
That's a good question.
I think so too.
And he keeps digging deeper.
Read it.
The judge would have no other choice than to remind you of your naive ways. Yeah, I wrote that.
Judge Judy. You are about to enter the courtroom of Judge Judith Scheindlin. The people are real. The cases are real. The rulings are final. This is Judge Judy.
Judge Judy is indeed a real judge, but the cases that you're watching on TV, she's actually acting as an arbitrator. This just means that she's given power to settle disputes, and these disputes are ones that would most awfully end up in a civil trial. Which brings us to the Seventh Amendment, which guarantees the right to a trial by jury in a civil case. Some examples might be property dispute, a workplace injury, divorce proceedings, child custody battles. This would all fall under that civil law. In case you got upset that I didn't tell you the actual wording of the Seventh Amendment, if you turn to page 23, it says that in suits at common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved. So common law in the Constitution is also known as civil law, and that means that there's just compensation in a dispute. Criminal law, on the other hand, which was covered under the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment, means that there's an actual punishment. It could be fine, it could be imprisonment. And the way I have you remember the Seventh Amendment is Civil 7, or there are 27 amendments in the Constitution, and according to the Constitution, the Seventh Amendment only refers to civil cases over $20. 20 plus 7 is 27. Either way, Seventh Amendment, a guarantee to trial by jury in civil cases. Discussing trial by jury in both the Sixth and Seventh Amendment inevitably brings up the question, how do you get chosen for a jury? And it's this common misconception that the only way you're entered into the drawing to be in the jury is by registering to vote. And so I have had students in the past and adults say, I just won't register to vote, and then I'll never have to serve on a jury trial. I have two responses to that. Number one, I've been a registered voter for 18 years and I've never been called to jury trial. Number two, the other way Ohio gets you in that list is licensed driver. So anyone who gets a driver's license is also entered into the pool to be chosen at random to serve on a jury. Now, personally, I would love to serve on jury duty. I think it's my duty as a citizen, and then also as a government teacher, I'd love to be able to share that experience with you. Now, many jury duty cases you may be excused from, so the fact that I'm a teacher and a mother may excuse me from some cases. If I have any sort of personal connection to like one of my students, I can never serve on a trial for one of you. I personally would have a hard time serving in a case that might have to do with kids or with teenagers, just because of my place in society as a parent and as a teacher. But I want to get the chance, and I've never been called for jury duty. And so that kind of brings into what I'm having you guys do this week to help you understand a little bit more about what jury duty might look like. You can actually go to Ohio's website and watch the video that they show members of jury after they've been selected. I wanted to show you a quick clip here as well.
Fundamental right available to everyone and is a treasured part of our legal system. The types of cases heard in jury trials can be criminal or civil. In a criminal trial, the person accused is called the defendant. 12 people are chosen for a jury trial in common pleas court, 8 people for municipal court jury trials. In all criminal matters, the jury has to reach a unanimous decision to find the defendant guilty or not guilty. Civil trials involve disputes between individuals or organizations brought to court by the party called the plaintiff against the party being sued called the defendant. The cases can include contract disputes and personal injury lawsuits. There is an 8-member jury for a civil trial, and at least 6 must agree to the decision.
And then this week, you're going to have this an Ed puzzle that goes over the different roles in a courtroom, and then a Google form that I want to explain. So this week's Google form is going to look a little different. Since we're unable to do a mock trial, I still wanted to give you kind of a chance to act as a member of a jury. You're going to be looking at 3 different cases. And so for each case, I'm going to provide a document that gives you some facts and evidence that you're going to need to read through and then answer some questions about it to help you to determine how you're going to vote in this case. Let's take a look at the Google form. So for each case, if you look at the very top, it's going to show a very brief synopsis. So this one says, a neighborhood watch officer shoots and kills an unarmed Black teenager. The neighborhood watch officer claims he was acting in self-defense. The prosecution claims self-defense was not needed and that the unarmed Black teenager was shot unjustly. So then when you click on the link, and you're going to need to click on the link to properly do this form, it's going to pull up a Google document that gives you some additional evidence. And so if you look at this one, it'll talk about maybe some laws that you're going to come into play with this case, and it may give you some background information. So for instance, the stand your ground. So the state in which the crime took place has a stand your ground law, which permits the use of deadly force when someone reasonably feels at risk of serious injury in a confrontation. And so for each piece of evidence, you're going to answer the question. So it says, the first question on this form says, stand your ground. What does the evidence say? So there's where you're going to type what you learned about the evidence. And then based on just that evidence alone, how would you vote? So knowing that it is a stand your ground state, would that make you vote guilty or not guilty? In the Ed Puzzle video this week, it's going to talk a little bit about the role of the judge and the jury. And one of the roles of the judge is to inform the jury of the law that's in play when it comes to the case at hand. And so you do have to look through the evidence and see what the law actually is before you can fairly decide whether or not you believe someone is guilty or innocent. So the next piece of evidence that it talks about is the suspect's past. And so if we look at the evidence sheet, it tells you that the suspect has in the past been arrested for shoving an undercover alcohol control agent and has a restraining order issued against him at the request of his ex-fiance. And so you're going to briefly summarize that. And then based on that, how would you vote? Would you vote guilty or not guilty? And so you're going to continue to go along with each of the evidence, answer the question, let me know if you would vote guilty, not guilty. And then, so murder case number 1, the defendant is. So taking into account all of the evidence that you read about, are you going to vote guilty or not guilty? Now, here's the thing about being a member of a jury is you're not being tested. And so this is truly your belief. And so after you cast your vote, which I'm not going to mark correct or incorrect, this is your opinion based on the facts, I will then reveal to you how the jury voted in that case. You'll then watch a short video that tells you some facts from the actual case and how the jury ruled. And I'll have a few questions that go along with that. Now, there are 3 different cases, again, that you're going to be doing this through. So it is going to take a little bit of time to do this Google form. So again, Google forms do not allow you to start and finish at different times. So make sure you give yourself plenty of time to complete the Google form in its entirety. Don't start this Google form with only 10 minutes left in your academic support class. This is probably something you're going to want to do at the beginning of the period. Lucky for me, the video editing software that I use to record these videos does allow me to start and finish at different times, which is why I did some of this video yesterday and some today, and I'm showing you some from yesterday. You can't do that with the Google form though. Unfortunately, I hope it's something that they fix in the next few months. I've been complaining to them about it for years. One other thing I forgot to mention, you may remember at the beginning of the year, I talked a little bit about Civic Simulation Club, and a few of you joined. We just wrapped up Guns Are Better, and there was lots of nuking and negotiations going on. But next, we're going to move on to our mock trial, which is something we normally do in my class. So if you're really into the Bill of Rights and the thought of being a lawyer or a witness or a defendant or a member of the jury interests you, then come join our next meeting. At our first meeting next year, we are going to choose a trial, and then we'll assign roles, and then that way we can have that mock trial. If you come and the trial doesn't interest you, then you don't have to be in the club. Or if after the trial you don't want to do our next activity, then you don't have to be in it anymore, but we would love to see you. I'll have the information, interrupt me, and you can sign up and get more information. And there you have it. We are back. I know we haven't done this since last year, but here we have our Edpuzzle Google form. And then next week, when we're looking at the 8th Amendment, which is a fun one, we'll do Edpuzzle critical thinking question. Please reach out if you want me to come say hi or if you have any questions. I did forget to mention the grades for this week. I'm actually going to put on next 9 weeks grade just to kind of give us that buffer. And so whatever you see in progress book at this point should be your report card grade. Can you believe we're halfway through the year? All right, we will see you next week.